Good evening, everybody. It's Sunday night once again. If I said before, I'll say it again. There's no better place to be except one, and that's when we all get to heaven. And I hope that you are planning on being in heaven, because I'm planning on being in heaven, and I want to see you there. I tell people this before, especially when I go to a new congregation and meet new family members. I'm like, give that opening. I was like, I want to be up there, and I want to be and get together with everyone that I know and everyone that you know, and we'll just pull up a corner of heaven and we'll just have the biggest reunion going on. And I want God to send Michael, the archangel, over to our corner and say, could y'all quiet it down? We're ready to start, because I want to have that kind of experience in heaven. I think there's no better place to be. And what a reunion that will be when we do get to heaven, right? Seeing all the loved ones that's passed on before. And there's just not going to be a better place to be than heaven. Tonight, before I get started, I want to thank Chris again for letting me come over here to speak in front of you. Y'all's family. I'm sorry, I adopted y'all. So hopefully you've adopted me. But I feel like we're family, and that's good, right? Because we're all family anyway, right? Family, brothers and sisters in Christ. So tonight we're going to touch on a little bit a topic on friends. And, when you say to someone, you are my friend, what are you implying? Well, a friend, I looked that up in the dictionary because I wanted to make sure I was right on what I think a friend is. And the dictionary said it's a person attached to another by feelings of affection or personal regard, and a person who gives assistance. And that should be a good definition of friends, right? That should be what we all think of when we say, they are my friend. But we know friends can either be good or they can be bad, can't they? We've all known people that have friends, and we look at their friends and we say, he needs to change friends. Those people he calls friends are bad. He shouldn't have those friends. So I have two examples, if you will, of friends. And the first one we're going to look at is taken from 2 Samuel chapter 13, and it is over Amnon and Jonadab. And it's one of these friendships that we probably grew up listening to it in Bible study, and maybe you've heard a sermon or two about, but really we don't really think too much about Amnon and Jonadab. But they are friends. Amnon is, if you remember, is one of David's sons. Not for sure where he's at in the peck, but he's one of his sons. And he has a half-sister named Tamar. And Tamar is described as being very beautiful and a virgin. In other words, she is a type of girl that all the guys should want to be with. And on top of that, again, she's very beautiful. Well, Amnon was in love, or really infatuated with her. His desire for her was so strong that he literally would make himself sick just thinking about his half-sister Tamar. And to make matters worse, he was frustrated at what he could do. Well, we look at that and we should think of it being as a disgusting thing. And really it should be. He should have just said, I can't do this. I need to get it out of my mind. But Amnon didn't do that. And Amnon, though, has a friend named Jonadab. And Jonadab, our text describes as being a very shrewd person. You know what shrewd is. Someone who's always able to think of things, and it's not always for the benefit of those who hear him or listen to him or her or whatever. Someone shrewd that always works out seems to be for them. And it's usually not for the betterment of whoever they tell the advice to. Well, he's friends with Amnon, and he sees Amnon just being frustrated, just being ill every time Tamar walks through, and Amnon seeing her, and he just gets ill. And so one day he sees Amnon, and Amnon's down in the dumps, and Jonadab sees this, and Amnon tells him what's going on, and Amnon comes up with an idea. Jonadab tells Amnon, lay down on your bed and pretend to be ill. When your father sees you, say to him, please let my sister Tamar come and give me some food to eat, and let her prepare the food in my sight that I may see it and eat from her hand. Sounds like a good plan, doesn't it? What could possibly go wrong with that plan? David should have seen through it, but yet David doesn't, because word gets back to the king that Amnon is ill, and David sends messenger saying, what can I do? And Amnon tells the messenger what he wants. And so David, the king, sends Tamar, his daughter, on. Well, when she gets there, Amnon basically rapes Tamar. And if that wasn't bad enough, Amnon then basically treats her like trash. Doesn't want anything to do with her. Doesn't even want her around. In fact, Amnon, in 13 verse 5 or 15, it says, and Amnon hated her with a great hatred, for the hatred with which he hated her was greater than the love with which he had loved her. And Amnon said to her, get up, go away. Now, if you think about it, here was a situation where a friend, told someone else to basically lie to the father, to send someone over to him so that he could have his way with her, which really wasn't right to begin with. And now he's upset. It's like a child that, when Christmas season first starts, way back in August, and they see the toy commercials and they want that thing really bad. They want this particular toy really bad, and they pester the parents, you got to buy me this. Everybody has it. Maybe, it's the latest, video game or whatever. And they want it, and they bug you and they bug you and they bug you about it. And so you buy it, and the child gets it, and they look at it and go, and they put it off to the side. That's basically the way Amnon treats Tamar. Except here it's worse, because Amnon violated his half-sister. And instead of being a man about it and standing up and saying, what I did was wrong, I'll take care of you, he puts her out, which is even worse, because now, where's she going to go? If she had anyone that she was seeing, if she had any male friends or whatever that might be interested in her, she's now violated, and she's really in a tight situation. It's not going to be good for her. And Amnon, though, hated her now more than he loved her. And David, who is the father of both Amnon and Tamar, did nothing to punish Amnon. He didn't even go over and say, what you did was wrong. You need to do what's right and take care of your sister. But he didn't even do that. He just really makes matters worse and just didn't do a thing, which then involves Absalom, David's firstborn, the one who would be king or in line to be king when David passes. And so we know the story with them, that David refuses to do anything with Absalom after he seeks revenge or takes vengeance upon Amnon, and he flees and he comes back, and David doesn't have anything to do with him. And Absalom, because of that, will try to take over the kingdom from his father and will end up being killed fighting against the king's men. All this because of Amnon listening to a friend. Friendship is something that should be sought, but it should also be something that we take very seriously, either in giving advice or paying attention to advice. Friends can get us into so much trouble, can't they? Well, another example that I have is found in 1 Samuel chapter 18, verse 1, and it is David and Jonathan. In chapter 18 of 1 Samuel, David has just conquered Goliath, and the king Saul is talking to David, trying to figure out who this brave young man is. And after David gets through talking with Saul, the text says that the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as himself. Now, we don't read of anything that Jonathan and David might have done. We don't read of them going off into battle together and dispatching Israel's enemies or anything like that. And so we're kind of left to wonder if they did things like that. And I'm sure they probably did. But one thing we do read is that later on, Jonathan, when Saul was I forgot what word I was looking for, was intent on killing David because he was jealous of David and just knew that David was going to take the throne, Jonathan defended him before his dad. In fact, it caused Jonathan, defending David in front of Saul, caused Saul to really cuss Jonathan out and really had nothing to do with Jonathan. That's a friend, isn't it? That's a friend that everybody wishes they had. Someone who would stand up to them. Well, we all want friends, don't we? I don't know of anyone who can honestly say, I'm fine by myself. I don't want to be around anyone. I don't want any friends. Now, there are times when we can be just fine by ourselves. But, really, when you get down to it, when you start really thinking about it, somewhere down the line, you're going to need somebody. A situation is going to come up to where you just don't have the answer, just don't know what to do, and you're going to have to look at somebody and say, can you give me advice? Or maybe you need help doing something. Maybe you're building a house, or maybe you need a car fixed or worked on, or maybe you're moving, or maybe you just need help in school or something like that. Somewhere down the line, you're going to have to find someone that you can count on to be there for you and to give you advice. Well, we need to be cautious about how many friends we have. A lot of people, especially with the advent of social media, some people get hooked on looking at likes and how many people subscribe to their site and stuff like that. And there's people out there that get jealous if they don't have very many subscribers. I'm never going to be that way because I don't have that very many people subscribe to me. But that's fine. Those that I have and those that listen and those that read my post are my friends. And that's great. And most of you are in the church, so that's even better. But Proverbs in 18 verse 24 says that a man of too many friends come to ruin. We think about, now how can that be, Solomon? How can you have too many friends? Well, I think it's because a person that has too many friends may become confused and may come to ruin because they do not hear the good advice of the friend who Solomon describes as who sticks closer than a brother. You can hear and you can have a lot of people giving you advice, and maybe you've been that one person that gave the good advice, and a person that you're trying to give advice for, they went all over, maybe it's a coworker, and they went all over asking people what they should do, and they all gave advice, and you're thinking, that's not what they need. They shouldn't do that because this is going to go to here and it's going to go here. It's going to go here. And before you know it, they're going to be in trouble. So you try to give that good advice, but that person doesn't listen to you. And later on, you look to see where they wind up at because they listen to all those other voices, and you think they had too many friends, didn't they? They should have just stuck with the one that they trusted. They should have stuck with the one that told them the truth, that told them what they needed to hear, not what they wanted to hear, and they would have been fine. Which brings me to another example of too many friends and listen to bad examples is 1 Kings chapter 12, where Rehoboam has taken his father's throne because Solomon has passed on. Rehoboam's king. The people come to him and says, if you'll lighten our load, we'll be yours. Your father put a heavy yoke around our neck. And you just think about what the text says about the reign of Solomon. It said that silver was as common as rocks. Even in the best economy that we've had in these United States, people still kept silver. We have never attained the prosperity that Solomon had in Israel. And so the people, so imagine that the yoke was hard on the people to be that prosperous. And so they come to Rehoboam and says, your father was harsh. He had a heavy yoke. Lighten the load and we'll be there for you. And so he asked the people or the elders that advised Solomon, he asked them that, and that's exactly what they said. Do as the people ask, and they will follow you. Pretty simple, Rehoboam. You want the people to follow you? Do as they ask. Lighten the load a little bit. Cut the taxes a little bit. Give people a little bit extra spending money in their paycheck. They'll follow you. We haven't changed at all, have we? If you want people to vote for you, what do? You cut the taxes, because if you give people back more money to spend, they're going to spend money. They're going to say, look at what he did. I don't have to pay as much taxes. He's going to get my vote. If you don't want to be reelected, what do? You raise taxes and you tell people this is the way it's going to be. But that's enough politics. But that's kind of what Rehoboam's facing. And so Rehoboam, after he hears what the advisors of Solomon said to him, the old people, us old people, he goes to those that was raised around him, the young people, and he asks them, says, what's your advice? And they tell him, you tell the people this, my little finger is thicker than my father's loins. Whereas my father loaded you with a heavy yoke, I will add to your yoke, and my father disciplined you with whips, but I will discipline you with scorpions. Well, we know what happened, don't we? Jeroboam with 10 other tribes left. And because of that, because of Rehoboam listening to bad advice and sticking with it, the 10 northern tribes split from Judah and from Benjamin. And Jeroboam, even though God told him that he would be king if he just obey his commands, thought that these people went back to Jerusalem, they're going to kill me and get rid of me, and there goes my kingdom. He set up 2 golden calves. And when you read in 2 Kings on the fall of Israel, the northern kingdom, all the way down to the end, it listed the 2 golden calves that Jeroboam set up as being the root cause. We never read of the 10 northern tribes really coming back like we do Judah. And it's all over bad advice. It's all over someone listening to their friends who did not give good advice. Solomon in 19:6 says, many will seek the favor of a generous man, and every man is a friend to him who gives gifts, but a friend is someone who will stick with each other through thick and thin. Have you ever been around somebody that they maybe they have a good paying job, maybe they just have money, and they always pay for other people's stuff, and everyone wants to be around that person. But be careful, because when that money runs out, if you're that person that is constantly buying things for other people, when you're out of money, they're not going to be your friend. They're going to come up and say, hey, Chris, let's go out on the town. Let's go to the movies. And Chris says, well, things got a little tight. I don't have the money. Can you buy my ticket? Well, I don't really have the time to go to a movie, Chris. I'll see you later. It happens. And the older you get, it doesn't change. It's always there. You want a person that's going to stick with you through thick and thin, like Proverbs 17:7 says, friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. You know, my brother and I, we fought all the time. But I had friends that stuck with me. And I valued their advice a lot more sometimes than I did my brother because, well, didn't really get along with my brother that much. But anyway, we need someone who will be with us through thick and thin. But have you ever thought about if there's a way where friendship can come apart? You know, sad to say, when I was friends with a lot of people in school that I really don't talk to that much, if at all. Our interest is simply separate or too far apart where it doesn't really interest me to talk to them because I know basically what they're going to say. Well, Solomon says there are two things that will separate friends. In Proverbs 16:28, he says, a slanderer separates intimate friends. You know, someone who's always talking bad, someone who's always spreading, well, the term now is fake news. You know, maybe you're a good guy, but maybe they're jealous of you and they'll go around and whisper in other people's ears and say, you know, you don't want to be around that Tim guy. I've heard this about him. Or we used to do this. Well, another person is in 17:9. It says, he who repeats a matter separates intimate friends, and careless words ruins friendships. Have you ever been around someone that keeps saying, I've changed? I know what I've done was wrong, but I've changed. I'm sorry I hurt you. And you say, okay, I forgive you. And you start being around the person again. And all of a sudden they do the same thing again. And then you bring it up to them. It's like, oh, I'm sorry. I'll change. And then they do the same thing again. Pretty soon you have to draw the line and say, we can't be friends. I can't keep putting myself in your trust and you keep hurting me. That's not the way friendship is it? Nothing will ruin friends quicker than someone spreading lies about someone or you being hurt or you hurting someone. But there is one more example of friendship. And that is between God and man and God. You know, God takes care of man and he set him up in authority over his creation. The psalmist in Psalms 8:4-6, the psalmist writes, what is man that you take thought of him? And the son of man that you care for him? Yet you have made him a little lower than God, and you crown him with glory and majesty. You make him to rule over the works of your hands. You have put all things under his feet. You know, David's credited for writing this, and David is basically looking around and he sees himself in the eyes of God, and he wonders, who am I that you even think about me? You know, really, when we get right down to it, we could all ask that question, can't we? We could all walk up to God and say, why do you even care about me? You know? But just think of what God has done. He created this world that takes care of us, and he has set us in authority over it. We will have to answer one day on how we have kept his creation or have not kept his creation. But for the time being, God has put us in charge. And not only that, even when we mess up, Jesus says he still takes care of us. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 45, Jesus says he causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good and sends a rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. I know we joke sometimes going on and a rain cloud comes through and it rains maybe a block or two away from you and it comes right up to where your farm or garden is and it stops. I have a friend that lives out in the panhandle of Texas, and he says, you must not be living right when you see the storm clouds roll in and they look like it's going to come right over your area, and the clouds part and they go around and they pass you by and then they come back together. Well, we joke about that. Well, you must not have been very good, because, God would have sent you rain, but Jesus says he sends rain on both. And that's a true friend, isn't it? That's someone that is a true friend, that he takes care of those even when we are not very friendly to him. And God proves to be such an outstanding friend that he even initiated his plan of salvation before he even said, "Let there be," for you and me. I sometimes think that we don't really think about the plan of salvation and just what God did for it. Paul says before creation. You go back to Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, and it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and he said, let there be light. And Paul says, before the very beginning, God knew what it would take for you and I to be saved. And he planned it out. And from the time of very beginning, when he said, let there be, God had a plan, and he took care to initiate that plan for our salvation. So really the answer is, and besides that, he predestined us to adoption as sons through Jesus Christ himself, and it was all according to his kind intention of his will. Now, this predestined doesn't mean that you was chosen and there's nothing you could do. It just meant that he knew you would hear his call. The call that everyone has a choice to obey if they want to. It's out there for everyone. God doesn't care who you are, except he wants you to be saved. He doesn't care if you're rich. He doesn't care if you're poor. He doesn't care if you're short or if you're very tall, skinny or fat, whatever. God wants you. That's what I mean when I say God doesn't care who you are. He does, because he wants you saved. And Paul says that we're adopted through his son, Jesus. And it was all because of his kind intentions of his will. God put it out there, and it's there because he wants it there. He's not going to yank it back. And Jesus tells his disciples in John that no greater love has anyone than this, to lay one's life down for his friends. And you are my friends if you do what I command you. So how are we to be a friend to Jesus or to God? Well, I think of no better example than Abraham. Now, Abraham sinned, didn't he? He told a couple of lies about Sarah. He jumped the gun whenever God came and says, Abraham, I'm going to bless you, and you're going to have a son, and your seed's going to be like the stars in heaven and on the sand of the seashore. And he didn't really think about how God was going to do this. Sarah didn't really think about it. And so they kind of try to help God, and God's like, quit, don't. It's going to be from you. It's going to be from her. And so we kind of have to let God work his plan. But overall, Abraham was described as this by James in James chapter 2:23. It says, the scripture was fulfilled, but says, and Abraham believed God, and it was reckoned to him as righteousness, and he was called the friend of God. Wouldn't that be wonderful if someone that was talking about you and they said, I know Luke, and God thinks Luke as a friend. He's a friend of God. That should make anyone feel great. To be called a friend of God has to be the most wonderful thing that we could ever hope to attain to. And the only way we can do this is if we are living our lives according to his statutes and his commands. Because Jesus says, if you love me, you will follow my command. To be a friend of God, to be friends, to treat each other the way we should be treated, to be there for someone who is really in need, to be a helping hand, but above all, to be a friend to God and be considered his friend. I don't know where you're at tonight, but I know that everyone here wants to be considered a friend of God. And that's the way it should be. The invitation is yours while we stand and sing.